All right. Check, check. Shalom, shalom. Israel, most high Christ bless. Back again with history in the AM. Uh Type Y in the chat if you can hear me. Go ahead and thanks. So all right, cool. All right, so we're gonna pick up where I left off last time. I did history in the AM to be the Persian and Median captivity part two. Um, we'll do a quick recap. Um, if you want more in depth, go back and watch part one. As I always say with everything else, started with the Assyrian, went through the Babylonian. Now we're in Persian, the beginning of the Persian and Median captivity, and we'll go all the way up until uh Greece, whenever Alexander comes and overthrows Darius. We go into the Greco-Roman captivity. Uh, so, quick recap. Um, Darius the Mede overthrew Babylon, which you read in Daniel the fifth chapter. Daniel came and the hand came and wrote the handwriting on the wall. Daniel came and interpreted. Let them know that Babylon was about to be overthrown, and that night, the kingdom was destroyed, and we went into Persia. Also, um, Daniel was set up Persia as well, um, and essentially the just like in Babylon, they sought occasions with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's their names were changed to that. Their names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Um, and they got thrown in a fiery furnace. Same thing happened with Daniel when he was thrown into the lion's den. Um, but the Lord delivered him from that. We had Habakkuk who brought him food. Where you read in Bell and the Dragon. Uh, and the reason why they got mad because Daniel was basically making a mockery of their gods because they were shown to not be gods at all when you read in Bell and the Dragon. Um, so I want to hop right into it because we touched on Bell and the Dragon last time in the history that took place during Persia. Uh, there was a lot of different events that took place during the Persian and our time with Persia and Media. Like I said, we touched on Bell and the Dragon that took place during that time period where you read in Daniel 6. And all that was going on during the time of Ezra 1 and 1. Read about Daniel 6. So let's go to just real quick Daniel the seventh chapter. I know we read it last time. Um, real quick. This is Daniel chapter 7, and I'm gonna start at verse 5. Because when you read Daniel chapter 7, that represents the time of the Gentiles. He had a vision and he saw four great beasts that came up from the sea. And each beast represented it. Represent an empire in history. Um, the first, of course, being the eagle. The first was like a lion with eagle wings. That was Babylon. The next was a bear. That's Persian. You know, on, it goes into actually wrong touch once we get to those time periods in history. So Daniel 7 and verse 5, it says, Behold, another beast, a second like unto a bear, raised up itself on one side. It had three ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said, Thus unto it arise, devour, and flesh. So that bear, and it was raised up on one side, like I said before, it goes into it was a two kingdom empire. Say it like that. It was a two kingdom empire. That's why it was the Persian and Median captivity. But it being raised up on one side, one of those kingdoms became more powerful than the other. When you jump over to Daniel 8, goes into details about that. Matter of fact, Daniel chapter 8 and verse 3. It says, Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram with two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. That's going in the same thing where it says it was raised up on one side. Daniel 80 says he saw a ram with two horns, but one horn was higher than the other, meaning more powerful than the other. Matter of fact, jump over to verse 20, same chapter. It says, The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. So those were those two kingdoms, those two kings. And Persia rose up mightier than Mede. That's why throughout history, it's known as the Persian Empire, not the Persian Empire, because Persia engulfed Media. The Medes were still there. They still occupied a certain territory, but Persia basically reigned as that powerful kingdom. Uh, because that plays a part in understanding who the kings are. Because when you start getting into Persia, there's a lot of similar names, and it when it comes to the kings that were ruling at the time, and it bounces back and forth. Like in the beginning, when we were reading Daniel the 6th chapter, before uh Darius, it spoke about Darius, the Mede, because that's the one who, when you read Daniel 5 and 31, he's the one who overthrown Babylon and the Medes primarily reigned in Chaldea, or Babylon. But you read about in Daniel 6, you read about Darius. Even when you get over to chapter 9, which we're going to read in a second, uh, it speaks about Darius. But then when you jump to Bel and the Dragon, it talks about Cyrus. Matter of fact, Bel and the Dragon. Real quick. Bel and the Dragon. Hold on. Getting it. Bel and the Dragon. Uh, 1. It says, and King Astages, I'm probably butchered, was gathered unto his fathers, and Cyrus of Persia received his kingdom. So that's because you had those two kings, two kingdom empire. That's why it bounces back and forth. But eventually, Persia was the dominant. So let's go to Daniel chapter 9. Matter of fact, yeah, let's read Daniel chapter 9. Because last time we touched on Daniel 8 with Persians was the Persians and the Medes. Shushan, when you go back to Genesis 10 and 22, which was Elam. Shushan or Elam, which would be the Iranians, the Turks, the Kurds, things of that nature. Those people, Iran, modern day Iran today, would be the Medes and the Persians. Persians. All right, so let's get Daniel the 9th chapter and the first verse. It says, In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. You gotta keep in mind where it says the seed of the Medes, because you're gonna read about other Dariuses, but they were Persians, not of the seed of the Medes. Right here, this Darius is the same Darius we read 5 as well as chapter 6, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. Because remember, Cyrus was also king at this time as well. So it says, In the first year of Darius, son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolation of Jerusalem. So keep in mind, because I know a lot of times when we read Persian and Mede, Captivity, which we're gonna read about as Haggai, also Zechariah, uh, but a lot of times Daniel was there as well. Daniel was there for some of the Persian Mede captivity, and he understood certain things, like we're reading here, where he said, matter of fact, verse 2 again, it says, "In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolation of Jerusalem." Matter of fact, let's read that real quick. Jeremiah 29 real quick, because he was reading Jeremiah and understood. Oh, okay, God is going to bring us back to basically allow us to come back to the land. That's what he's saying when he said, "I understood the number of the years whereof Jeremiah spoke, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolation." This is where he's referring to Jeremiah 29 and verse 10. It says, "For thus saith the Lord, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, visit you and perform my good word toward you, causing you to return to the place." So that's what Daniel is explaining in chapter 9 and 2. Was that 70 years was up. That was once Babylon was destroyed. 70 years we were in Babylon, and now we will be released to let go back to our land. So now back to Daniel 9 and Daniel 9 and verse 3. It says, "And I set my face unto the Lord to seek by prayer and supplication and fasting and sackcloth and ashes." So with Daniel understanding that, he faced Jerusalem and sent up the prayers. Verse 4, it says, "And I prayed unto the Lord my God, and made my confession, and said, O Lord, the great and dreadful God, keeping the covenant and mercies to them that love him, them that keep his commandments. We have sinned and have committed iniquity, have done wickedly, have rebelled, even by departing from thy precepts and from thy judgments. Neither have we hearkened unto thy servants the prophets, which spake in thy name to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, and to all the people of the land. O Lord, righteousness belongeth unto thee. To us confusion of faces, as at this day, to the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and unto all Israel that are near and that are far off, through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespasses that they had trespassed against thee." So he's praying, basically making supplication to God, stating we've sinned, because he understands God. The time has been accomplished for us to be delivered back to the land. So he's praying to the Lord, we saying we have sinned, we have not listened unto righteousness belong unto you, Lord, but unto us confusion of faces, and you scattered us throughout all. Matter of fact, verse 7 again, "O Lord, righteousness belongeth unto thee, but unto us confusion of faces, as at this day, to the men of Judah and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and to all Israel that are near and that are far off, through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespass that they have trespassed against thee." We were scattered throughout all the countries even then. Watch this, verse 8. "O Lord, to us belongeth confusion of face, to our kings, to our princes, and to our fathers, because we have sinned against thee." Verse 9. To the Lord our God belongeth mercies and forgiveness, though we have rebelled against him. So he's making supplication. Mercies and forgiveness belongeth to God, even though we've rebelled. Watch this. Verse 10. "Neither have we obeyed the voice of the Lord our God, to walk in his ways, to walk in his laws, which he set before us by his servants the prophets." Watch this. I want to jump down to uh verse 18. It says, "Oh my God, incline thine ear and hear, open thine eyes and behold our desolations, the city which is called by thy name. For we do not present our supplications before thee for our righteousness, but for thy great mercies. So he's asking the Lord, incline, open thine ear, look, behold our desolations. Because remember what we read in verse 2, he understood that the number of the years based off what Jeremiah wrote, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolation of Jerusalem. So is that time for us to go back? So Daniel's making supplication. He's praying to the Lord to remember that, to deliver us. Incline thine ear, look upon the desolation of thy people. Verse 19. O Lord, hear, O Lord. Forgive, O Lord, hearken and do. Defer not for thine own sake. Oh my, defer not what? Bringing us back to Jerusalem. It says, defer not for thine own sake, oh my God, for thy city and thy people are called by thy name. And whilst I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God from the for the holy mountain of my God. So he said, while he was praying, while he was speaking, watch this, verse 21. Yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation, oblation, meaning of the evening prayer. Verse 22. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. Sheesh. Verse 23. At the beginning of thy supplication, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision. So basically, he came to let Daniel know that at the beginning of your supplication, the commandment came forth. I am come to show thee. Therefore, for thou art greatly beloved, therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. Verse 24, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make the end of the sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the Most High. So now he starts to show him a vision, which we'll touch on later as we get towards Greece, the Greco captivity. So I just wanted to read that because Daniel was making prayer based off what he read in Jeremiah, that our desolation was accomplished, and he sent up supplication to for the Lord to bring us back into Jerusalem. Then the angel came and told him the commandment has went forth. Now watch this. Let's go to now Ezra 1:1. Go to Ezra, the first chapter and the first verse. So Daniel understood it. Uh, Many of the prophets understood that when Cyrus, because remember, Isaiah prophesied that Cyrus would release us and allow us to go back into kingdom. So the prophets were in tune. Understand that. Uh uh and I know a lot of times we forget, not that we forget, but Daniel isn't mentioned as heavily during the Persian and Median captivity. But he was there and he understood, and he had many visions during that time. Like Daniel, the ninth chapter, the 10th chapter, even I believe chapter 11 and 12. So now watch this. Let's go to Ezra 1:1. Chapter 1 verse 1. So you had Daniel who prayed that the Lord deferred not. The angel came, let him know that the commandment had went forth. So now Ezra 1:1. It says, now in the first year of Cyrus king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. Remember, we read the same thing in Daniel 2, that he understood from the prophet Jeremiah that 70 years had been accomplished of the desolation of Jerusalem. It says, verse 1 again, now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and put it also in writing, saying, so the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, the king of Persia. I mean, we just read in Daniel, the angel came and said, at the beginning of thy supplication, the commandment went forth. Then he came to give him skill and understanding and show him a vision. So it said, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia. He made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and put it also in writing, saying, verse 2. Um, verse 2, it says, saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he hath charged me to build him an house at Jerusalem, which is Judah. So he made out a proclamation and basically said God had charged him to build a house in Jerusalem. Now, watch this. We're gonna go to First Ezra real quick, chapter 2. So when you're reading the book of Ezra, Nehemiah, First Ezra, and Second Ezra, um, First Ezra coincides with Ezra 1 and 1. The history kind of similar to First Kings, Second Kings, First Chronicles, Second Chronicles, how um they run together. Ezra, Nehemiah runs in conjunction with First Esdras. Uh, and when you read First Esdras is more so historical history. When you get to Second Esdras, that's where Ezra was speaking with the angel and shown certain visions, certain prophecies. So let's go to First Esdras, the second chapter. Basically, the same history that we're reading at Ezra chapter 1. Because when you read First Ezra, the first chapter, he gives you kind of a recap uh from the time of Josiah, King Josiah, all the way up to us going into Babylon, certain events that happened in Babylon, and then us going into Persia. So when you get a chance, go back and read First Ezra, the first chapter, because it summarizes all that history to one chapter. So first Ezra 2 and verse 1. Says, in the first year of Cyrus, king of the Persians, that the word of the Lord, that the word of the Lord might be accomplished, that he had promised by the mouth of Jeremy. Jeremy is Jeremiah. Um, remember, the Apocrypha was translated from Latin and Greek. Um, and that's why it says Jeremy there. That's talking about Jeremiah. Verse 2, it says, the Lord raised up the spirit of the king of the Cyrus, the king of the Persians, and he made proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also by writing, saying, thus saith Cyrus, the king of Persia, of the Persians, the Lord of Israel, most high Lord, who hath made me king of the whole world, commanded me to build him an house at Jerusalem in Jewry. That's saying the exact same thing as Ezra 1, where it says he charged him to build a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. So now let's go back. Ezra 1 and verse 3. So it says, Who who is there among you? Ezra 1 verse 3. It says, who is there among you of all his people? His God be with him. Let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel, is the God which is in Jerusalem. So now he gets charged. Basically, the decree goes out, the letters go forth on what he's due. Then he asks, who is there among you of all his people? Talking about the Israelites. Um, his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build a house to the Lord. Verse 4, whosoever remaineth in any place where he sojourneth, let the men of his place help him with silver and gold and with goods and with beasts, beside the freewill offering for the house of God that is in Jerusalem. So also he said, all those whosoever in any place where they've sojourned, let that place help them, basically give them silver, gold, goods, provisions to be able to go and build the temple, rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Verse 5, it says, then rose up the chief of the fathers of Judah and Benjamin, and the priest and the Levites, with all them whose spirit God had raised to go up to build the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem. So we were released, and the chief of the fathers of Judah and of Benjamin and of the priest and the Levites, and although, and it says, with all them whose spirit God had raised, go up to build the house of the Lord, which is. So you had primarily the southern kingdom, and you still had a remnant of northern kingdom that went up and watch this. Let's go to Second Ezra real quick, because during this time, northern kingdom decided to leave. Let's go to Second Ezra, First Ezra, yeah, Second Ezra 13. Second Ezra 13, start at verse 40. It says, those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Osea the king, whom Shalmaneser the king of Assyria led away captive. So that time period was during the Assyrian captivity. It says, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. Verse 41. But they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen. So, verse 40 was the Assyrian captivity. But when you get to verse 41, that's talking about Persia. So, there's a lot of time and a lot of history that's taking place between verse 40 and 41. So, they took them counsel during what we're reading here in Second Ezra chapter 1 and verse 1 through 5, where Cyrus released us, and you had uh the southern kingdom, Judah, Benjamin, the priests, and whoever's spirit God raised up to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild. But the bulk of the 10 tribes, the rest of the 10 tribes, they took a counsel. Watch this, Second Ezra 30, 13 and 41 again. But they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave. Did you try again? Verse 41 again. It says, but they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen, go forth into a further country, ever mankind dwell. So they rose up and decided to leave the multitude of he go to a country wherever mankind dwelt. Verse 42. It says that they might there keep their statutes, which they had never kept in their own land. So they wanted to leave to go basically to this side of the earth. That's where never mankind dwelt, the Western Hemisphere, to keep the commandments. That's why when you look throughout history, many of them, like for example, the so-called Native Americans, they had fringes on their clothes. Certain customs of the quote unquote indigenous people on this side were were similar to what you read in the Bible. Why? Because what we're reading here in Second Ezra, the when they came over here, their thought was to keep the commandments, which they didn't keep in their own land. But eventually they went off, started going into idolatry. Like when you watch the movies of Pop the Lip Go and things of that nature. But they had a lot of their traditions and customs that you read throughout history were from the Bible because they are the people of the book. Those were those 10 tribes we're reading that came over here to keep the commandments which they didn't keep in their land. Watch this. Verse 43. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow passage of the river. Now it's giving you the basically the directions of what they took to get to this side of the earth. It says, and they entered into Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. So basically, the Lord showed them signs to guide them on which direction to go and held still the waters. That's what it meant, the floods, held still the water. So the waters were calm as they were coming over here. It says, for through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. It took them a year and a half to get over here. It says, in the same region is called Arsareth. So this region was identified as Arsareth. You look at the Jewish encyclopedia, go into it, and you look up Arsareth. They even understand and know this was the name used to identify where Christopher Columbus was going. That he used the writings of Ezra. He identified Arsareth with this land. That's how he knew to come over here. That's how he knew people were over here. We were over here. So now let's go back to Ezra 1. Ezra, first chapter. Now, you still had a remnant of Northern Kingdom that did not go with the bulk of the 10 tribes to the to the Americas. Uh, you had some that stayed back. Like one we're gonna read more in depth is Judith was an example of Northern Kingdom, tribe of Simeon. Also, when you get up to John 4, that's why you had those Samaritans, as they called them, which was Ephraim or the northern kingdom. They were still there. So you still had a remnant that stayed back. That's what we're reading in Ezra chapter 1. Matter of fact, verse 5 again, it says, Then rose up the chief of the fathers of Judah and Benjamin, the priests and the Levites with all them whose spirit God had raised. So God had raised the spirit of some of the northern kingdom, a remnant of the northern kingdom, to stay and go back to Jerusalem to help rebuild. So that's why when you fast forward, there's still John 4, and you read in certain places, there's still a remnant of northern kingdom there. But the bulk of the 10 tribes came to the Western Hemisphere with what we read in Second Ezra 13. So now back to Ezra chapter 1 and verse 6. It says, And all they that were about them strengthening their hands with vessels of silver, with gold, with goods, with beasts, and with precious things, besides all that was willingly offered. So it says, them that were about them, meaning all the nations about them, basically gave the goods, gave gold, gave vessels of silver, gave beasts and precious things, and all that was willingly offered, because that was the decree from Cyrus. Verse 7. Also Cyrus the king brought forth the vessels of the house of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had brought forth out of Jerusalem, and had put them in the house of his gods. Even those did Cyrus king of Persia bring forth by the hand of Mithridath the treasurer, and numbered them unto Shishbashar, Czar, the prince of Judah. This is the number of them: 30 charges of gold, 1,000 charges of silver, 9 and 20 knives, 30 basins of gold, silver basins of a second sort, 410, and other vessels 1,000. All the vessels of gold and of silver were 5,400. All these did Sheshbazzar bring up with them of the captivity that were brought up from Babylon and unto Jerusalem. So Cyrus basically took all the vessels that were taken out of the temple, what we read back in Second Chronicles 36, as well as Second Kings 24, during the destruction of Jerusalem. All those items were taken out of the temple by Babylon. Cyrus took them and gave them basically to the prince of Judah, Sheshbazzar, and had them brought back to go back into the temple. Now, chapter 2, verse 1. It says, Now these are the children of the province that went out of the captivity of those which had been carried away, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away unto Babylon, and came again into Jerusalem and Judah, everyone unto his city. So when you read chapter 2, it's going into the genealogy of everyone that left and came back into the city to help rebuild. Now let's jump down to verse 61. It says, Now the children of the priest, children of Hathbiah, the children of Koz, the children of Barzillai, which took a wife of the daughters of Barzillai the Gileadite, the Gileadite, and was called after their name. These sought their registry among those that were reckoned by genealogy, but they were not found. therefore were they, as polluted, put from the priesthood. So we still had somewhat of our records intact at this time, um, coming from Assyria, Babylon, and Persia. A lot was burnt during the time of Babylon. Like when we read, as we read through Persia, as they're rebuilding the temple, rebuilding the wall, they find a book of the law in the rubble, and they're excited because a lot was burnt, but we still had some records as far as registry and genealogies and things of that nature. That's how they knew who was from whose father was who. uh we've lost that up until today, when we once we went into Greece, into Rome, and then we went into, when once 70 AD, Jerusalem was completely destroyed. We fled into Africa and then brought over here. We lost those records. Uh, that's why Spirit Bearer Deuteronomy 28 is our registry. It is our proof of genealogy, per se, because many of our records were lost. But here during the Persian captivity, us leaving and going back to Jerusalem, we still had some of those records. And here you read some of the children of the priest, they sought their register among, verse 62 again, it says, these sought their registry among those that were reckoned by genealogy, but they were not found. Therefore were they, as polluted, put from the priesthood. So they couldn't find that they were actually from the tribe of Levi. They weren't in the registry, so they were put out from the priesthood. Because remember, the Levites were the ones that were supposed to. They were the priests. They were the ones that worked in the temple. Verse 63. And Tishartha said unto them, and that they should not eat of the most holy things till there stood up a priest with Urim and Thummim. So it said those they shouldn't eat of the most holy things. Because remember, we read earlier in verse 1 where it says everybody went back into Jerusalem unto their own cities. So they still had inheritances of land. They knew where, because you still had some of those that were the chief and elders of Israel that still understood and knew, that were around during the time when the first temple was still standing. Um, so they knew where to go as far as their inheritances of land. Remember, there still was a remnant that was left in Jerusalem as well, with that you read about with Habakkuk, um, during the time of Babylon. They were still left in the land. So you still had the poor sort that was still in the land, tilling the ground, things of that. So when they went back, um, this group of people basically was told that they should not eat of the sacrifices, the most holy things, the sacrifices, until there stood up a priest to decide with Urim and Thummim. In verse 64, it says, the whole congregation together was 40,002,303 score. So it says 42,303 and 60. Basically went back to Jerusalem. Said verse 65, beside their servants and their maids, of whom there were 7,330 and 7, and there were among them 200 singers, men and singing women. Now it says besides their servants and their maids. Watch this. Jump up to verse 55. It's amongst the genealogies. It says the children of Solomon's servants. So whenever we went into captivity, uh our servants went with us into Babylon. That's the same thing with why we went into all these different national, like with the Assyrians, how the northern kingdom got into Babylon, because when Babylon overthrew Assyria and all its slaves and servants went to Babylon. Same thing with us being under Babylon, Persia overthrew it. Now everyone comes under that kingdom. Same thing with here. When we were in rulership, our servants of the other nations went into captivity with us. So that's where right here, verse 65, it says, besides their servants and their maids, of whom there were 7,330 and seven, there were among them 200 singers, singing men and singing women. Their horses were 730 and six, their mules 240 and five. Watch this. I'm jump down to verse 69. Matter of fact, we'll read on. It says their camels 430 and five, their asses 6,720. And some of the chiefs of their fathers, when they came to the house of the Lord, which is at Jerusalem, offered freely for the house of God to set it up in his place. They gave after their ability and to the treasure of the work 61,000 drams of gold, 7,000, and 5,000 pound of silver, 100 priest garments. So the priest and the Levites, some of the people and the singers, and the porters and the Nethinims, dwelt in their cities, and all Israel their cities. So now let's jump to chapter 3. Today's gonna be, I meant to say it in the beginning. Today's gonna be a little bit of reading as we go through Persian captivity. So basically they were released. Chapter 2 is everyone that came back. There was a total of what did it say again? 42,360 people came back to Jerusalem. Uh and they have the goods to be able to rebuild. Now chapter 3 verse 1. It says, and when the seventh month, all right, 3 verse 1. It says, and when the seventh month was come, children of Israel were in the cities, people gathered themselves together as one man to Jerusalem, meaning everybody came in one mind as one. They had one singular thought, and that was to rebuild the temple. Verse 2, it says, then stood up Jeshua the son of Jehozadak, and his brethren the priest, and Zerubbabel the son of Salathiel, and his brethren, and builded the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings thereon, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. So these men came together to charge the people, and they built the altar uh, to offer burnt offerings thereon. So you had Jeshua, uh, as well as Zerubbabel, the son of Salathiel. Watch this. Let's go to Matthew 1. This Zerubbabel was a Judite from David's line. And he was primarily in the line and lineage that Christ came through. Let's go to Matthew chapter 1. And I'm going to jump down to verse 12. So when you read Matthew 1, it goes through the genealogy or the generations of Jesus Christ, from Abraham all the way down. Matthew 1 and verse 12, it says, and after they were brought to Babylon, Jeconias begat Salathiel. So Jeconias, when he went to Babylon, which this Jeconias is the king that was taken into Babylon, Jehoiachin, who that's whose name Jeconias or Jeconiah, whose name was changed to Jehoiachin. It says, begat Salathiel, and Salathiel begat Zerubbabel. So this same Zerubbabel is what we're reading about in Ezra chapter. So now let's go back. Uh, Ezra 3 and verse 2. It says, then stood up Jeshua, uh, Jeshua, the verse 2 again. Then stood up Jeshua the son of Jehozadak, and his brethren the priest, Rubabel the son of Salathiel, brethren, and builded the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings thereof, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. And they set the altar upon his bases, for fear was upon them because of the people of those countries. They offered burnt offerings thereon unto the Lord, even burnt offerings morning and evening. So It says they set up the altar upon the basis, for fear was upon them because the people of those countries. And we're going to get into that as far as to why fear, because the other nations were coming against Israel in the building of the temple and the building of the wall. Um, so, verse 4, they kept also the Feast of Tabernacles, as it is written, and offered the daily burnt offerings by number, according to the custom, as the duty of every day required. So they came back and kept the Feast of Tabernacles, as it is written in the land in Jerusalem, as it is written. They created booths. They dwelt in booths 7 days. They offered a sacrifice every day according as it was written. Verse 5. And afterward offered the continual burnt offering, both of the new moons and of all the set feasts of the Lord that were consecrated, and of every one that willingly offered a freewill offering of unto the Lord. So they kept all the high holy days, they kept the feast days, they kept the Sabbaths, they kept all everything you read in Leviticus the 23rd chapter. They're back in Jerusalem and they kept it as it is written, and offered sacrifices as it is. So now let's jump down to chapter 4. Matter of fact, let's jump. I'm gonna jump down to um, verse 9. It says, then stood Jeshua with the sons of his brethren, Cadmiel and his sons, and the sons of Judah, together to set forth the workmen in the house of God, and the sons of Henadad with their sons and their brethren the Levites. So now they set up the altar. Now it's time to lay the foundation for the temple, to build the temple. It says, verse 10, and when the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, they set the priests in their apparel with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals, to praise the Lord, after the ordinances of David, the king of Israel. And they sang together by course and praising and giving thanks unto the Lord, because he is good, for his mercy endureth forever toward Israel. And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. But many of the priests and Levites, the chief of the fathers, who were the ancient men that had seen the first house. So it's saying many of the Levites, the chief of the fathers, who were the ancient men, the elders. It says, verse 12, that had seen the first house when the foundation of this house was laid before their eyes, wept with a loud voice, and many shouted aloud for joy. So, as the foundation was laid, many of those that were during the time that saw the first temple began to shout with joy because it'd been burnt, it'd been destroyed. uh Verse 13, it says, so that the people could not discern the noise of shout of joy for the noise of weeping of the people. The people shouted with a loud shout, and the noise was heard afar off. They were shouting with joy, praising the Lord, because they had brought us back. He had brought us back into the land, and the foundation of the temple had been laid. Now, chapter 4 and verse 1. It says, now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of the captivity builded the temple unto the Lord God of Israel, they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers and said unto them, let us build with you, for we seek your God as ye do. And we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Anesar, king of Ashur, which brought us up hither. So, because remember, we went back into Jerusalem. Remember, the heathens were already there throughout Israel. Watch this. Let's go back to Second Kings real quick. Because if you remember, back in, I can't remember if it was part one or part two of the Assyrian captivity, where we went over how whenever Northern Kingdom was took out of the land, and that's what he's making reference to right here of Asaradan, king of Ashur, talking about the Assyrian king. Whenever Northern Kingdom was taken out of their land, they put the heathens back in the land. Watch this, Second Kings. 17. I'm gonna get to the point. Verse. I'm gonna read 27 and I'm gonna jump down. Um, Matter of fact, no. Verse 24 and I'm gonna jump. It says, "And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, from Cutha, and from Ava, and from Ava, and from Hamath, and from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. They possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof." Now, watch this. I'm gonna jump down to verse um 32. It says, matter of fact, verse 27. It says, "The king of Assyria commanded, saying, carry thither one of the priests whom ye brought from thence, and let them go and dwell there, and teach him let him teach them the manner of the God of the land." Because whenever those other nations was put in the land, the Lord started jacking them up, sending wild beasts and lions, and started killing them. So they took one of the priests that Jeroboam had set up, of the lowliest of the people of the northern kingdom, took them and sent them to the land to teach them the manner of the God. So that's why when you get to Ezra 4 and chapter 4 and verse 2, it says, "Then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers and said unto them, Let us build with you, seek your God, as do you. And we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Elsarhaddon, king of Ashur, which brought us up hither." That's what he's talking about. We sacrifice unto the God since that time. But they wasn't coming to serve God. Watch this. Let's go. Let's read Second Kings again. Let's jump down to verse Second Kings 17 and verse 32. It says, "So they feared the Lord and made unto themselves of the lowest of them priests of the high places, which sacrificed for them in the house of the high places. They feared the Lord and served their own gods." So they sacrificed to the Lord in those different places just because the Lord was jacking them up. But they didn't fear the Lord God. They still serve their own gods. So let's go back to Ezra 4 and verse 3. Watch Zerubbabel's response to them. It says, "But Zerubbabel and Jeshua, the rest of the chief of the fathers of Israel, said unto them, Ye have nothing to do with us to build an house unto our God. We ourselves together will build unto the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, had commanded us." So they basically said, "Listen, y'all ain't got nothing to do with us when it comes to building an house unto our God, because this is our God. This is the God of Israel. This has nothing to do with you." And that's even unto us. This is an example for us today. I know a lot of these camps, a lot of brothers want to try to integrate the other nations with us and bring the heathen in. No, no, no. They ain't got nothing to do. We don't need them. We gonna raise up and we gonna rebuild Israel because the spirit of God has came upon us, just like our forefathers did. We they ain't got nothing to do with us when it comes to building back our nation, and that's what Zerubbabel was explaining. Then, like, listen, now y'all stay over there. Y'all ain't got nothing to do with us. We gonna build it. We gonna build back the house unto our God, which King Cyrus has commanded us. Watch this, verse 4. It says, "Then the people of the land weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in building." That goes back to chapter 3, where it talks about, and they set an altar upon the basis for the fear of the people, for fear was upon them because of the people. The fear was upon them because uh, basically they tried to weaken the people of the land, weaken the hands of the people, and they troubled us during the building of the temple. So now watch this. Verse 5. It says, "And hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even into the reign of Darius the king." So the whole, so what, from the time that Cyrus was reigning all the way up to Darius, Darius the king of Persia, they troubled and hindered the building of the temple. So now, this Darius was different than the Darius we read earlier. This was when you read history, Darius the king of Persia, or they name him Darius the Great, which I believe was Darius the Second. He was the son of Cambaeus, who we're about to read about in a second. So watch this. Let's go to First Ezra's 5 real quick. Because it says they hired counselors against them and they frustrated their purpose and they basically tried to weaken and trouble the entire time we were building the temple. I want to go to First Ezra's real quick. First Ezra's chapter 5 and verse 70. It says, then Zerubbabel, which is Zerubbabel, and Jesus, which is Joshua or Jeshua, what we're reading in Ezra's, but we're also reading Haggai, Joshua. And here it says Jesus, which that's the Greek for Joshua. Verse 7, it says, then Zerubbabel and Jesus, and the chief of the families of Israel said unto them, it is not for us and you to build together an house unto the Lord our God. So this is the same thing we just read, where he said it ain't for us to come together to build a house of the Lord. Verse 71, we ourselves alone will build unto the Lord of Israel, according as Cyrus the king of the Persians have commanded us. Watch this, verse 72. But the heathen of the land laying heavy upon the inhabitants of Judah and holding them straight hindered their building. So they laid heavy upon us and hindered our building. This is how it says, verse 73. This is how. And by their secret plots and popular persuasions and commotions, they hindered the finishing of the building all the time that King Cyrus lived, so that they were hindered from building for the space of 2 years until the reign of Darius. So this is how they hindered the building. This is how they laid heavy, similar to what you see going on today with the SPLCs and Amalek and what they have and your Tip and all the different organizations that they have through their secret plots and popular persuasions and commotions. So they would cause all these different things. They would have it would be certain things that would happen. Uh uh like when we go back to chapter 4, which we might get to it today. Where once Cyrus died, they started coming together and sending letters and having the kings write decrees to stop the building through their secret plots and popular persuasions. Similar to what you see today, where you have the SPLC say, "Oh, they're a hate group," and they're on the top of the. Here it is. The KKK is at the bottom of the list, and we're at the top, number 2 and number 3. When it comes to hate groups, those are secret plots, popular persuasions to persuade the people to go against us to hinder the building. That's the same thing we're reading about here during the time of the Persians. So now watch this. Let's go back to Ezra 4, verse 5 again. It says, and hired counselors against them. Because remember, the counselors, those were people that would go to the king and go to the different governors and go to the different princes and governors that were set up in these different regions. Because remember, they were supplying us supplies. They were giving us goods that you read about in chapter 1. So they would hire counselors to stop that, to hinder, to because you got to go in, you got to really delve into historically what's happening, what's taking place. That's why I said similar to what you see today, the different tactics that they use to try to hinder the work. That's the same thing you see there. Stopping transports of counseling with the governors and kings of the land to put out certain decrees to stop the building to where we couldn't build. And that's what you read in chapter 4. So watch this, chapter 4, verse 5 again. It says, and hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, the king of Persia. Watch this, verse 6. It says, and in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, wrote they unto him an accusation against the inhabitants of the Judah and Jerusalem. This is some of those popular persuasions, those counselors sending to write an accusation against us to the king to get us to stop building. But watch this. It says, and in the reign of Ahasuerus. So uh let's jump real quick to Judith. Because right here, this Ahasuerus is actually, when you read in history, Cambyses II. So you had Cyrus the king on the Persian side. You also had Darius on the Mede. After Cyrus, you had Cambyses II, who right here is named Ahasuerus. That basically reigned after Cyrus. Now let's go to Judith, the first chapter. Judith 1, a sidebar for a second. Um, because that's why I made the statement earlier. There were a lot of different events that took place. There was a lot happening during the Persian captivity. You had us going back into rebuilding the temple. You also had Daniel, who was in Persia, who were getting certain visions, things of that nature. Also, during you had the events that took place with Judith. All this was happening around the same time. So now let's go to Judith, chapter 1 and verse 1. It says, in the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, reigned in Nineveh, the great city, in the day of our which reigned over the Medes in Ecbatane. So now, this Nebuchadnezzar right here is is not the same Nebuchadnezzar that overthrew Babylon. This Nebuchadnezzar right here, when you look through history, is either Nebuchadnezzar the third or the fourth. It goes back and forth between the two. Some say it was the same person. Some say Nebuchadnezzar the third and the fourth were brothers, and one killed the other. Uh, but it's Nebuchadnezzar the third or the fourth, depending on what you're reading in history. And then this our facts at here is actually uh Ahasuerus or Cambyses the second that you're reading. We're gonna touch that as we read. So Judith 1 and 1, it says, in the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who reigned in Nineveh, the great city, in the days of our which reigned over the Ecbatane, built in Ecbatane, walls round about of stone, hewed 3 cubits broad and 6 cubits long, and made the height of the wall 70 cubits, breadth thereof uh, uh, 50 cubits. Watch this. I'm jump down to verse 5. Verse 5, it says, even in those days, Nebuchadnezzar made war with King Arphaxad in the great plain, which is in the plain of the borders of Regu. So this, what we're reading about in Judith, was actually there was a time period after Cyrus, during Cambyses II or Ahasuerus, where you Ezra 4, where Babylon attempted to rebel, to basically rise up and try to overthrow Persia, and that was what you read here with Nebuchadnezzar the third. I'm gonna say the third or the fourth, but Nebuchadnezzar the third or the fourth. Nebuchadnezzar the fourth. Um, basically tried to overthrow the Persian Empire, and that's what we're reading in. So watch this. I'm gonna jump down to verse 12. Uh, so Nebuchadnezzar went through a bunch of cities and started overthrowing the nations. He went and took Egypt. It was a battle. It was him trying to overthrow the empire of Persia and reclaim what was taken from. So he went through and started overthrowing cities. Uh, you had Egypt, certain places, and then he was coming against to take Israel. So watch this, chapter 12. It says, therefore, Nebuchadnezzar was very angry with all this country, and swear by his throne and kingdom that he should surely be avenged upon all the coast of Sicilia and Damascus and Syria, and that he would slay with the sword all the inhabitants of the land of Moab, and the children of Ammon, and all Judea, and all that were in Egypt, till ye come to the borders of the two seas. Then he marched in battle, arrayed, with his power against King Arphaxad in the 17th year, and he prevailed his battle, for he overthrew all the power of Arphaxad and all his horsemen and all his chariots, became lord of his cities, and came unto Ecbatane, and took the towers, spoiled the streets thereof, and turned the beauty thereof into shame. He took also Arphaxad, which is Cambyses II, or Ahasuerus, what we're reading, Second Ezra 4. It says he took also Arphaxad in the mountains of Ragu, and smote him through with his darts, and destroyed him utterly that day. So let's go back to Second Ezra 4 real quick. Because that's why when you read Second Ezra 4, verse 6 and 7, it changes. As far as kings very quickly. So Second Ezra 4 again, it says, and in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, wrote wrote they unto him an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. And in the days of Arphaxad, wrote Blishlam, Meredith, TBL, the rest of the companions, Artaxerxes, the king of Persia. And the writing of the letter was written in the Syrian tongue and interpreted in. Reason why there's a switch because what we're reading about in Judith, basically. And when you examine and read history, when it comes to Cambyses II, it tells you he was killed uh, um, trying to stop a rebel. The rebellion he was trying to stop was the rebellion of Babylon, the Nebuchadnezzar the fourth, who it rose up, and that's the history we're reading in Judith. Now, when you get to verse 7 in Ezra's 4 and 7, it says, in the days of Arphaxad, this Arphaxad is Bardia, when you read in history, which was the brother of Cambyses II. And there's a lot of history when it comes to whether this was Bardia or whether it was an imposter or things of that nature. Um, that's what certain scholars might say. But when you read this, this was Bardia, who was brother of second. Because Cambyses was killed in battle trying to stop the rebellion of Babylon. Brother basically stood up in his steed, and he didn't last long at all. And then Darius basically succeeded him. So now let's go back to Judith. So let's go through the history of Judas real quick. It'll be quite a bit of reading. Uh, so when you get to Judith, you're reading about the rebellion of Babylon trying to basically rebelling against Persia. So Cambyses the king was killed in battle, and Bardia his son, who is uh Artaxerxes, not Ahasuerus, Artaxerxes, to read uh Ezra 4. And you're gonna read that throughout Persia. They use a lot of the same names. Xerxes, Artaxerxes. This isn't the same Xerxes that you read about um uh during the time of the 300, that movie. That ain't the same Xerxes that we're reading Israel. So let's go to Judith, the fourth chapter. Let's jump to Judith, the fourth chapter, and let's start at verse 1. It says, now the children of Israel that dwelt in Judea heard all that Holofernes, the chief captain of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, had done to the nations, and after what manner he had spoiled all their temples and brought them to naught. So now word gets to Judea, to us in Judah, because remember we were just, it's gonna say it, we were just came back to the temple. We heard about everything that Nebuchadnezzar was doing and all the cities he had overthrown. Watch this, verse 2. Therefore they were exceedingly afraid of him, and were troubled for Jerusalem and for the temple of the Lord their God. But they were newly returned from the captivity. What does it mean, newly returned from the captivity? Meaning they just got out of Babylon, they just got released, went back to the Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. Now here, and keep in mind, that's what I said. A lot was happening to us as to why goes back to chapter 3, Ezra chapter 3, where it says fear was upon them because of the people about. Because here it is, you had all the heathen coming against us using popular persuasion and secret plots against us to hinder the building. On top of that, you have Babylon, who is now raised his head up to try to rebel against Persia, and basically is going through and destroying all these nations and overthrowing, and now it's about to come against Jerusalem. Keep in mind, we just came out of Babylon. So now they're hearing, oh, Nebuchadnezzar. That's why it says they were exceedingly afraid for him, because they thought, okay, here the heathens coming against us. Now Nebuchadnezzar's raised up. Now he's coming to overthrow us again, just like his great great granddaddy did, Nebuchadnezzar, when they came and burnt the temple. Because remember, Babylon burnt the temple. Now here it is, we're rebuilding, and here comes Babylon again. So watch this, verse 2. Therefore they were exceedingly afraid of him, and were troubled for Jerusalem and for the temple of the Lord their God. Uh, For they were newly returned from the captivity, and all the people of Judah were lately gathered together. And the vessels and the altar and the house were sanctified after the profanation. Verse 4. Therefore they sent unto all the coasts of Samaria, and the villages of Berthron and Belmead, Jericho, and Koba, and Asora, and the valley of Salem, and possessed themselves beforehand of all the tops of the high mountains, and fortified the villages that were in them, laid up victuals for the provisions of war, for their fields were of late reaped. So basically, they sent onto the coast and basically fortified these areas and sent provisions for war. They made basically geared themselves to defend themselves for war, because they heard Nebuchadnezzar, the Holofernes, was coming, who was the chief captain of Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 6, it says, also Joachim, the high priest, which was in those days in Jerusalem, wrote to them that dwelt in Bethulia and Bethomestham, which is over against Esdarleon, toward the open country near to Dothaim, charging them to keep the passages of the hill country, for by them there was an entrance into Judea. It was easy to stop them that would come up, because the passage was straight for 2 men at the most. So basically, he charged them to go here and keep, meaning guard the passages uh in of that hill country, because that was a straight way, that was basically a straight path into Judea, or into Judah, to Jerusalem. But it was a straight passage, meaning a narrow passage that 2 men at the most could go. So it would be easy for them to pick off anyone that's trying to come through that passage. Verse 8, it says, and the children of Israel did as Jotham the high priest had commanded them, with the ancients of all the people of Israel, which dwelt at Jerusalem. Verse 9, it says that then every man of Israel cried unto the God with great fervency, and great vehemency did they humble their souls, both they and their wives, and their children, and their cattle, and every stranger and hireling, and their servants bought with money, put sackcloth upon their loins. Thus every man and woman, and the little children, and the inhabitants of fell before the temple, cast ashes upon their heads, spread out their sackcloth before the face of the Lord. Also, they put sackcloth cloth about the altar. Cried to God of Israel with all with one consent, earnestly, that he would not give their children for prey, and their wives for spoil, the cities of their inheritance to destruction, sanctuary to profanation and reproach, for the nations to rejoice at. So they prayed that the Lord wouldn't basically give them back over as a spoil. Uh to and the sanctuary to profanation and reproach, for the nations to rejoice at. Remember, they were coming against us heavy from all different angles. Verse 13. So God heard their prayers, looked upon their afflictions, fasted many days in all Judea and Jerusalem before the sanctuary of the Lord Almighty. So the nations was coming against them. Remember, you had secret plots that was happening, persuasions was happening. Also, Arlophanes, the chief captain of Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, was coming against them to try to destroy them and basically take spoils of them. So they all fasted and came together, and God heard their prayers and heard and looked upon their affliction. For the people fasted many days in Judah and Jerusalem before the sanctuary of the Lord. Guess what? Same things happened today. That's why Side note, when you read Romans the 15th chapter, matter of fact, let's read it real quick. Romans 15 and 4. It says, For the things for whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. So here's an example, because as you see the bishops and classes that are coming out, it's things are it's going to turn up. Nations are going to come together against us, like you read about in Second Ezra 16. They're gonna take spoil of us. Many of us are gonna be cast into prison, killed, tortured. Uh, different many things are gonna happen. You even read about it's gonna get so bad a great fast is gonna take place, similar to what we're reading here in Judith, the fourth chapter, to where all these different things was happening to us while we were trying to rebuild and reestablish. You had secret plots, you had popular persuasions, you had them going to the kings to change laws and change decrees to stop the building. You also had Nebuchadnezzar, Holofernes coming against us to try to overthrow and take us for a spoil, to make war against us. So everyone came together under one consent and prayed and fasted, and the Lord heard us. Matter of fact, verse 15, verse 4 and 13 again, it says, So God heard their prayers and looked upon their afflictions. The people fasted many days in all Judea and Jerusalem before the sanctuary of the Lord Almighty. So back to the point of Romans 15 and 4, things that was written aforetime was written learn time from patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. We know that when these things turn up and when these things happen, that just like the same thing that happened with our forefathers, how they came together and fasted, God looked upon them and looked upon their affliction. The same thing that happened today. That's what you read in the scriptures, where we will fast and pray, and the Lord will look upon our affliction and do what? Have those armies now move and go towards. Bishop brought it out in the class last Sabbath, how the Lord will proclaim a fast because it's so bad, and the Lord will hear it. Same thing we're reading here in Judith, and look upon our affliction, and now redirect those armies to go to fight in what is called the Middle East, for ultimately our redemption. But anyways, that was just a sidebar, just Romans 15 and 4, and certain things we should meditate and put in our spirit to build our faith, to know that, hey, these things have happened to our people, and we have examples that God will show mercy. So watch this. Back to Judith 4 and where we left off, verse 14. It says, "In Jehoiakim the high priest and all the priests that stood before the Lord, and they which ministered unto the Lord, had their loins girt with sackcloth, and offered the daily burnt offerings, vows, and the free gifts of the people, and had ashes on their meat trees, and cried unto the Lord with all their power, that he would look upon all the house of Israel graciously." So now let's jump down now, chapter 5, verse 1. So they all came together, proclaimed the fast. Everybody was on one consent, and they vehemently prayed and fasted many days, that the Lord have mercy and look upon Israel graciously. Now, chapter 5, verse 1. Now, we read that the Lord did hear their prayers. And as we read on, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Judith to basically go and kill her Holofernes. So let's read it. Yeah, we got time. Judith 5 and 1. It says, Then it was declared to Holofernes, the chief captain of the army of Ashur, that the children of Israel had prepared for war and had shut up the passages of the hill country, and had fortified all the tops of the hill, the high hills, and had laid impedance in the campaign countries, wherefrom he was very angry. This is a point right here, too. Just a sidebar. Just back to the point in Romans 15 and 4. Even even though, because you hear the bishops and the deacons say all the time, prepare, preparation, prepare. Famine is coming, certain things are coming, prepare. Same thing we read with our forefathers. Yes, they came together, they fasted, they prayed to the Lord, they prayed that the Lord show mercy because of everything that was happening to them, but they still prepared. They went and fortified certain areas. They put provisions in certain areas for war. They fortified the hill countries. They still prepared, even though they ultimately understood that God is the one that was going to deliver. God is the one that will show mercy upon us. They prayed to the Lord that he showed mercy. They still prepared. That goes back to James where it says faith without works is dead. So just food for thought that you think that just I just I'm gonna live that's that Christian thought. I'm gonna live on through the spirit. I'm just gonna believe on Jesus and everything gonna be all right. No, there's still faith without works is dead. There's still preparation. You still have to prepare. And this is an example because our forefathers they didn't just leave on fasting and praying. Ultimately, that's what's going to deliver us. They still prepare. That's the point. Chapter 5, verse 2. It says, wherewith he was very angry, and called all the princes of Moab, and the captains of Ammon, and all the governors of the seacoast, and he said unto them, tell me now, ye sons of Canaan, uh, who this people is that dwell in the hill country, and what are the cities that they inhabit? What is the multitude of their armies? Wherewith is their power and strength? And what king is set over them, or captain of their armies? So now he has, it says, the sons of Canaan. This was Moab and Ammon. They were dwelling in the land. He asked them basically to give them him a report, a scouting report on these people in this land. Because remember, they was about to go and overthrow them. Basically, where does their strength lie? Who is their king? What is the multitude of their armies? Where's their power and strength? Where does it lie? Watch this. Let's jump down to verse 20. This is basically he goes through the history of Israel, and ultimately, this is the report. Jump down to verse 20. It says, now therefore, my Lord and Governor, if there be any error in this people, and they sin against their God, let us consider that this shall be their ruin. Let us go up, and we shall overcome them. Verse 21. But if there be no iniquity in their nation, let my Lord now pass by, lest their Lord defend them, and their God before them, and we become a reproach before all the earth, before all the world. So that's the report. That's where their strength lies. That's where their power was. And he explained that if they sin, we can overcome them. We can take them. But if they ain't in sin, their God is going to fight for them, and we will become a reproach throughout all the world. Watch this, verse 22. And when Achainor had finished these sayings, all the people standing around about the tent murmured. And the chief men of Holofernes and all that dwelt by the seaside and in Moab spake that he should kill him. Basically, they spake that Holofernes should kill Achainor because of a report he gave. Because basically, he told them that if they in sin, we can take them, but if they ain't in sin, you will, their God will fight for them, and you will become a reproach. Verse 23. For say they, we will not be afraid of the face of the children of Israel. For lo, it is a people that have no strength nor power for a strong battle. So that's what they murmured. They went and told him, basically saying, "Oh, he making it seem like these people, we should be afraid of these people." And they basically said, "We ain't gonna be afraid because they have no strength nor power for a strong battle." Because remember, only 42,000, roughly 42,000 of us went back into Jerusalem, and we were rebuilding the temple. We were still trying to fortify ourselves. So granted, yes, we wasn't a fortified army per se. So that's why they said they ain't got no strength and no power. Watch this, verse 24. Now therefore, Lord Holophanes, we will go up, and they shall be a prey to be devoured for all thine army. Chapter 6, verse 1. It says, and when the tumult of men that were about the council was ceased, Holophanes, the chief captain of the army of Ashur, said unto Achainor, and all the Moabites before all the company of the other nations, who art thou, Achaor, and the hireling of and the hirelings of Ephraim, that thou hast prophesied against us as today? has said that we should not make war with the people of Israel because their God will defend them. Because keep in mind, remember, we had just came back into the land. So what were we doing? We read in Ezra. Matter of fact, let's go back to Ezra real quick. Ezra, the third chapter, and verse 4. It says, they kept also the Feast of Tabernacles as it is, and offered the daily burnt offerings by number, according to the custom, as the duty of every day required. And afterward, offered the continual burnt offerings, both of the new moons and of all the set feasts of the Lord that were consecrated, of every one that willingly offered a freewill offering to the Lord. So remember, Achaor gave the report that if they're sinning, we can overthrow them. But if they're not, we will become a reproach. What was taking place in the land at the time? We were keeping God's commandments. We had rebuilt the temple. We remember we were just proclaiming the fast that the Lord would deliver us. So at the time, Israel was in their right mind keeping God's commandments. So that's why everybody looked at him the way they did, because basically he told them that you ain't gonna be able to come up against these people. You will be destroyed. Their God will fight for them. You will become a reproach based off based off what we were doing in the land. Because he told them, if you go up, if they keeping the commandments, you better pass by. You better keep it moving. And at the time, we were keeping God's commandments, keeping the feast, we were keeping the new moons. We were sacrificing as it was written, as God had commanded us. The temple had been sanctified. The priests were doing the continual daily burnt offerings, things of that. So now, back to chapter 6 and verse 2 again. Judah 6 and 2 again. It says, and who art thou, Achaor, and the hirelings of Ephraim, that thou hast prophesied among us as today, and hast said that we should not make war with the people of Israel, because their God will defend them. And who is God but Nebuchadnezzar? So now he begins to pompous, because remember, they looked at Nebuchadnezzar as God. He said, who is God but Nebuchadnezzar? Verse 3. He will send his power and will destroy them from the face of the earth, and their God shall not deliver them. We, his servants, will destroy them as one man, but they are not able to sustain the power of our horses. Basically, he said, who is God but Nebuchadnezzar? Nebuchadnezzar will send his power and destroy them off the face of the earth, and their God won't defend them. Now he begins to get pompous. Watch this. So now that he basically says, as you read on, he basically tells. As a matter of fact, let's read to verse 6. Verse 4. For with them will he tread them underfoot. Their mountains shall be drunken with their blood, and their fields shall be filled with their dead bodies. And footsteps shall not be able to stand before us, but they shall utterly perish, saith King Nebuchadnezzar, Lord of all the earth. For he said, none of my words shall be vain. So keep in mind, Alophanes is saying this in front of all the nations, his advisors, all this is a military. So he's saying this uh in the council, because remember, all these men came to basically counsel, murmur about what Achaor had said concerning the report that Harlophanes asked him. So he's saying this to all of them. Verse 5, it says, and thou, Achaor, and hireling of Ammon, which has spoken these words in the day of thine iniquity, shall see my face no more from this day until I take vengeance of this nation that came out of Egypt. And then shall the sword of mine army, the multitude of them that serve me, pass through thy sides, and thou shalt fall among their slain. I return. Now therefore my servants shall bring thee back into the hill country, and shall set thee in one of the cities of the passages. Thou shalt not perish till thou be destroyed with them. Basically, he said, basically, get out of my sight, and I'm gonna kill you. And we're gonna take you to this city. This is where you're gonna stay until you be killed when I destroy them as well. So now let's jump down to chapter 7, verse 71. It says, the next day Holofernes commanded all his armies and all his people which were come to take his part, and they should remove their camp against Bethulia, and to take and to take aforehand the accents of the hill country, make war against the children of Israel. Then their strong men removed their camps in that day, and the armies of the men of war was 170,000 footmen and 12,000 horsemen, beside the baggage and other men that were aforefoot among them, a very great multitude. This is why you read, this is why they were so pompous in the saying that they were the children of Israel were had no strength and power for a strong battle because they took 170,000 footmen as well as 12,000 horsemen. So you had 12,000 on horse, and then 170, what was it? 170,000 footmen going to make war against Jerusalem. A very great multitude. Verse 3. And when they camped in the valley of Bethulia by the fountain, they spread themselves and breathed over Dothaim, even to Belmaim, and in length from Bethulia unto Seamon, which is over against Esdraelium long. Now the children of Israel, when they saw the multitude of them, were greatly troubled, and said every one to his neighbor, now will these men lick up the face of the earth. Neither the high mountains, nor the valleys, nor the hills are able to bear their weight. Then every man took up his weapons of war, and when they were kindled fires upon their towers, they remained and watched all the night. But in the second day, Holofernes brought forth all his horsemen in sight of the children of Israel. So he just brought his horsemen, all 12,000, in the sight of the children of Israel, which were in Bethulia, and viewed the passages up to the city, and came to the fountains of their waters, and took them, and set garrisons of men of war over them. And he himself removed towards his people. Then came unto him all the chief of the children of Esau, and all the governors of the people of Moab. So just side point, Esau is always there when it comes to destroying and going against it. That's why when you read um Ezekiel 35, where it talks about he had a perpetual hatred, you see time and time again through history. Whenever Whenever it's time to go against Israel, to destroy them, to overcome them, Esau is always there. That's why you read Revelations uh 13. It described him with all these different attributes from these empires, from these captivities, because Esau is always there when it comes to the destruction of, matter of fact, I gotta read. Let's read that. Ezekiel 35 real quick. Just real quick. Ezekiel 35, verse 2. It says, Son of man, set thy face against Mount Seir and prophesied against it. So Mount Seir is talking about Esau. Let's jump down to verse 5. It says, Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, and in the time of their iniquity had end. That's going into during the time of Babylon and up until today. It says, Therefore, as I live, saith the Lord God, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. Sith thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. So the point is, he has a perpetual hatred. That's why throughout history, in our captivities, when it comes to the nations coming against us, Esau is always right there. Comes to destroying us because of that perpetual hatred. It's like in Babylon, he was there. Same thing you're reading here in Persia. Matter of fact, Judith, back to Judith 7th, in verse 8 again, it says, Then came unto him all the chief of the children of Esau, and all the governors of the people of Moab, and the captains of the seacoasts, and said, Let our Lord now hear a word, that there be not an overthrow in thine army. So now, watch this. Let's jump to uh chapter 8. Chapter 8 and verse 1. Now, when you get a chance, go back and read the book of Judith and all the history. I'm just going through and touching different parts. uh, of the history that was taking place during that time. Because remember, God heard our prayers and looked upon our affliction. This is how He delivered us. Uh, chapter 8, verse 1 says, "Now at that time Judith heard thereof, which was the daughter of Mariah, Miriah, the son of Ox, the son of Joseph, the son of Oziel, the son of Elkiah, the son of Nias, the son of Gideon, the son of Rephion, the son of Akado, the son of Elihu, the son of Eliab, the son of Nathaniel, the son of Samuel, the son of Salasazdi, the son of Israel." I know I probably butchered some of those. Verse 2. "And Manasseh was her husband, of her tribe and kindred, died in the barley hearth." So Manasseh, they were of the same tribe and kindred. Like you read in Tobit 4, on how he instructed them to take a daughter of thy tribe, of thy kinsman. So Manasseh was from the tribe of Simeon. We're going to read that later on. So watch this. Let's jump down to verse 5. It says, matter of fact, we'll read on verse 3. "For as he stood overseeing them that bound sheaves in the field, the heat came upon his head, and he fell on his bed and died in the city of. And they buried him with his fathers in the field between Elthium and Alamo." So he died while he was out working from the heat. Verse 4. "So Judith was a widow in her house 3 years and 4 months." Died 3 years and 4 months ago prior to this. Verse 5. "And she made her a tent upon the top of her house, put a sackcloth upon her loins, and wear her widow's apparel. She fasted all the days of her widowhood, save the eves of the Sabbaths, and save the eves of the Sabbaths, and the eves of the new moons, and the new moons, the feast and solemn days of the house of Israel." So she fasted all the days except for the eves of the Sabbath, uh, the feast days, and she ate. She took part in the feast during those days, but outside of that, she fasted. Verse 7. It says, "She was also of goodly countenance, very beautiful to behold. Um, and her husband Manasseh had left her gold and silver, and men servants and maid servants, and cattle and lands. She remained upon them." Verse 8. "There was none that gave her an ill word, for she feared God greatly." This is the type of sister that all you sisters should be striving to be. Not in the sense of uh cutting a man's head off, being manly and warlike, because that wasn't Judith. Right here we read she no one could say any ill word towards her, and she feared God greatly. That's the type of name all you sisters should be striving for. This is the example y'all should be taking. Because I know a lot of times I've heard sisters say, "Yeah, I'm gonna be like Judith," in a sense of you're gonna be right there with the men trying to go to war, fight for the deliverance of Israel. No, 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 sister. That no, that ain't gonna be you. Uh, but the Lord used Judith in a sense to deliver Israel from this affliction. But the example is she could no one say give any ill word towards Judith. That's what all you sisters should be striving to say. Should nobody be able to say any ill word towards you? And it's because you fear God greatly. And you're walking circumspect. You are that Proverbs 31. This was a Proverbs 31 woman, right? All right, watch this. Let's jump to chapter 13. So as you read on, in Judith, she basically took off her raiment of her garments of widow. She put on them goodly garments, them banging garments. Matter of fact, where is it at? Let's read that real quick. Matter of fact, yeah, let's jump to chapter 9. Hold on 1 second. I didn't write it. Matter of fact, back to chapter 8, verse 9, then we're gonna jump to chapter 9. Judith 8 9. It says, now when she had heard the evil words of the people against the governor, that they fainted for lack of water. Judith had heard all the words of Ozias had spoken unto them, and that he had sworn to deliver the city into the Assyrians um after 5 days. Then she sent her waiting woman that had the government of all things that she had, called Zias and Carbus and Carmsims, the ancients of the city. And they came unto her, and she said unto him, hear me now, O ye governors of the inhabitants of Bethulia, for your words that ye have spoken before the people this day are not right, touching this oath which ye have made and pronounced between God and you, and have promised to deliver the city to our enemies, unless within these days the Lord turn to help you. And now, who are ye that have tempted God this day? Stand steadfast of God among the children of men. And now try the Lord Almighty, but ye shall never know anything. For ye cannot find the depth of the heart of man, neither can ye perceive the things that he thinketh. Then how can ye search out God that hath made all these things, and know his mind, nor comprehend his purpose? Nay, my brethren, provoke not the Lord our God to anger. For if he will not help us within these 5 days, he hath power to defend us when he will, even every day, or to destroy us before our enemies. So you had these ancients or the elders of that particular city basically made a decree that the enemy, if God don't help us in 5 days, that the enemy will overthrow us. So here she comes and basically tells them, like, hey, listen, that what y'all saying ain't right. Uh, and don't tempt God. God will deliver us as He will, whether it be 5 days or not 5 days. He would defend us as He will. Don't tempt God. And guess what? He either gonna deliver us or He might have us destroyed by His enemies. But at the end of the day, it's God's will. That's what she's explaining to them. Verse 16, do not bind the counsels of the Lord our God, for God is not a man that he may be threatened, neither is he as the son of man that he should be wavering. Therefore let us wait for the salvation, call upon him to help us, hear our voice, if it please him. Remember, eh, if you pay attention to history, she had the similar temperament as Azariah, Mishael, and Hananiah when it came to them being thrown in the fiery furnace. That was She had the same temperament when it came to God. Let God's will be done, whether it is for Him to deliver us or to destroy us. It's God's will, and it isn't up to us to threaten God, because essentially that's what He was doing, threatening God. Hey, the enemies will destroy us if God doesn't deliver us in 5 days. No, God is not a man, and our thoughts are not His thoughts. 'Cause remember, they said the same thing. Azariah, Mishael, and Hananiah, that we ain't gonna, basically told Nebuchadnezzar, we ain't gonna serve your gods, and God can deliver us. And if He don't deliver us, and we die in the fiery furnace, still let it be known that the same temperament was here. Let God's will be done. And that's what she's explaining to the ancients of that. So now, watch this. Let's jump down to chapter 9. Chapter 9, verse 1. It says, then Judith fell upon her face and put ashes upon her head, covered the sackcloth wherein she was clothed. And about the time that the incense of the evening was offered in Jerusalem, the house of the Lord, Judith cried with a loud voice and said, O Lord God of my father Simeon. This is how you know she was from the tribe of Simeon. He was northern kingdom. To whom thou gavest a sword to take vengeance of the strangers. Loosen the girdle of the maid to defile her. Discover the thigh of her shame, and polluted her virginity to her reproach. But thou sayest, it shall not be so. and yet they did so. Wherefrom thou gavest their rulers to be slain, so that they dyed their bed in blood, being deceived and smoted the servants with their lords, and and the lords upon their thrones. Hast given their wives for a prey, daughters to be captives, all their spoils to be divided among thy dear children, which were moved with thy zeal and abhorred the pollution of their blood, called upon thee for aid. O God, hear me also, a widow. So basically, she's saying they are all people, all Israel fasted and prayed to be delivered. Hear me, who hear me also, a widow. And as you read on, she prays for deliverance. Now, let's watch this. Let's jump down to time's sake. Let's jump to chapter 10, verse 1. It says, Now therefore, now after that she had ceased to cry unto the Lord of Israel, had made an end of all these words, she rose where she had fallen down, called her maid, and went down into the house, and the which she abode in the Sabbath days and her feast days, pulled off the sackcloth which put off the garments of her widowhood, washed her body all over with water, and anointed herself with precious ointment, and braided the hair of her head, and put on a tire upon it, put on her garments of gladness, wherein she was glad during the life of Manasseh her husband. She took sandals upon her feet, put about her her bracelets and her chains and her rings and her earrings and all her ornaments, and decked herself bravely to allure the eyes of all the men that should see her. So basically, and this lets you know the level of modesty that she had, because when the garments of her widowhood, she wasn't attractive. She didn't have the allure to attract men's eyes. She took off her garments and she took off the garments of widowhood and put on garments of gladness, and then she started decking herself out. Basically, she got herself to where she was bad, to where men would see her and it would allure them. Not that she was dressed in immodestly. Don't think that. She still was dressed modestly. She just didn't have on the garment she had a widowhood. She had her gladness of garments. Basically, she was bad. She was decked out. She put the rings on. Y'all know how y'all sisters be decking up, basically getting yourselves together for the feast days and certain things like that. Judith got them garments of gladness and basically changed her clothes and got herself together. Watch this. Let's jump down to verse. Where is it at? Uh, Watch this, verse 13. It says, And I am coming before Holophanes, the chief captain of you, to declare words of truth. I will show him a way whereby he shall go and win the hill country, wherewith where whereby he shall go and win all the hill country without losing the body or life of any one of them. Now, when the men heard her words, they beheld her countenance. They wondered greatly at her beauty and said unto her, Thou hast saved our life, and hast hasted to come down to the presence of our Lord. Now therefore come to his tent. Some of us shall conduct thee until they have delivered thee into his hand. So basically, she came down, said, Hey, I want to speak with Holophanes because I know a way to where they go down and win all the hill country and not lose uh, any life. Basically, nobody will die from that. And she was so beautiful that they looked upon her countenance. They're like, yeah, come on, yeah, come with us. Yeah, you saved your life. Yeah, come with us. We're gonna you sit here with us until we give you send you to Holophanes. Now watch this. Let's jump down to chapter 13. Chapter 13, verse 1. So now she gets before Holophanes. She speaks with him. She's in his tent. Her maid servant is also there. Well, 13, verse 1. It says, Now when the evening was come, his servants made haste to depart, and Bogias shut his tent without, and dismissed the waiters from the presence of his lord. They went to their beds, for they were all weary because the feast had been long. Meaning they had a long feast. So now they departed, they shut the tent, they left. All the waiters, basically, they cleared out the tent. Everybody was gone, and they shut the tent up because they were all weary because the feast was long. So you had Holofernes was left alone in the tent with Judith. You already know what Holofernes had on his mind. But Judith had a different plan. Watch this, verse 2. It says, and Judith was left alone in her tent, and Holofernes laying along his bed, for he was filled with wine. He was there. He was filled with wine. He was drunk, laid upon his bed. So he had one thing on his mind with Judith. Remember, she was the baddest in the land. And in his mind, oh yeah, sent everybody out, everybody left, and now it's Holofernes laying across his bed. Verse 3. Now Judith had commanded her maid to stand without her bedchamber. He commanded the maid stand outside the bedchamber and to wait for her coming forth. She did as she did daily. She said she would go forth to her prayers. She spake to Bogeus according to the same purpose. So they all went forth, and none was left in the bedchamber, neither little nor great. Then Judith, standing by his bed, said in her heart, said in her heart, O Lord God of all power, look at this present upon the work of mine hands, for the uh, extation, exaltation of Jerusalem. And now is the time to help thine inheritance, to execute mine enterprises to the destruction of the enemies which are risen against us. Verse 6. She came to the pillar of the bed, which was at Holofernes' head, took down his falchions from thence, approached to his bed, and took hold of the hair of his head. So think about it. She went to the pillar of his bed. She took down, grabbed the hairs of his head. Keep in mind, his mind, he had something else on his mind. So she grabbed the hairs of his head. Watch this, verse 7. Verse 7. And approached his bed and took hold of the hairs of his head and said, strengthen me, O Lord God of Israel, this day. And she smote twice upon his neck with all her might. She took away his head from off him. Damn. So basically, she prayed and asked the Lord, strengthen me. And basically, two swipe, bow, bow, and his head was off, clean off. Ooh. Uh, verse 9. And rumbled his body down from the bed and pulled down the canopy from the pillars. And along after she went forth and gave Holofernes his head to her maid. She put it in her bag of meat. So they twain went together according to their custom unto prayer. And when they passed the camp, they compassed the valley and went up into the mountain of Bethulia. So basically, she chopped his head off, pulled the canopy down, tumbled his body down from the bed, pulled down the canopy from the pillar over his body, came out the bed chamber, put the head in her bag of meat that her maidservant had, and then they left and went to prayer as they did normal time. Because remember, that's how she set it up. Because she asked, "Hey, can she stay here?" As she always does, because afterwards, prayer, go to pray. So they allowed it. So she was standing outside the bedchamber. So now watch this. Let's jump to chapter 15. Like I said, when y'all get a chance, read the entire book of Judith, the history, because it goes in more in depth on things that take place on the maid servant and how she prepped, how Judith explained to her what was going to happen, what took place, how she got in there, and things of that nature. I'm just hitting key moments in history for time's sake. So Judith 15 and verse, that ain't right. Uh, uh, let me see. Uh, yeah, let's 15. And let's start at verse 8. So now after all that, uh, matter of fact, no. It's supposed to, yeah, 14 verse 18. I wrote 15, 14 verse 8. I'm gonna start up verse 16. Therefore he cried with a loud voice and weeping and sighing. And that was Bogeus, the one we just read about in chapter 13. He's the one that's weeping. And says there, verse 16. Therefore he went with a loud voice, weeping and sighing, a mighty cry, and rent his garments. After he went into the tent where Judith lodged, and when he found her not, he leaped out to the people and cried, "These slaves have dealt treacherously. One woman of the Hebrews hath brought shame upon the house of King Nebuchadnezzar. For behold, Holofernes layeth on the ground without an head." The captains of the Assyrians' army heard these words. They rent their coats, and their minds were wonderfully troubled. And there was a cry and a very great noise throughout the camp. So keep in mind, Holofernes made this this crazy speech that to hell with the God of Israel, Nebuchadnezzar, our God, will save us. And then here it is, you have Judith come and behead him, and then throughout all the camp, all the captains are made known. So they like, what the heck? That's why it says their mind were wonderfully troubled. They were distraught because remember, Holofernes had just said that that ain't gonna happen. That if they're keeping the commandments, or regardless of whatever you said, a Kaor, the Moabite, that ain't gonna happen because Nebuchadnezzar, our God, is going to send his power. We're gonna destroy these people, and then not soon after he gets beheaded by a maid servant in, in his tent. So they like, what the hell? They keep in mind they remember everything. They remember what Cano, the report he had given them, because this is the captains of the Assyrians' army and heard these things. They wrought and they cried with a great cry throughout all the camp. So watch this. Now let's jump down to 15 verse 8. It says, then Jehoiakim the high priest and the ancients of the children of Israel that dwelt in Jerusalem came to behold the good things that God had showed to Israel, to see Judith and to salute her. When they came into her, they blessed her with one accord and said unto her, thou art the exaltation of Jerusalem. Thou art the great glory of Israel. Thou art the great rejoicing of our nation. Thou hast done all these things by thine hand. Thou hast done much good to Israel, and God is pleased therewith. Blessed be thou of the Almighty Lord forevermore. And all the people said, so be it. And the people spoiled the camp the space of 30 days. They gave to Judith Holofernes his tent and all his plates and beds and vessels and all his stuff. And she took it and laid it on her mule and made ready her carts and laid them thereon. All the women of Israel ran together to see her, to bless her, and to made a dance among them for her. She took branches in her hand, gave also the women that were with her, put a garland of olive upon her and her maid that was with her. She went before all the people in the dance, leading all the women. All the men of Israel followed in their armor with garlands, songs in their mouths. So once that happened, once she beheaded Holofernes, then the armies of Israel went out and spoiled all the camp of for 30 days of Holofernes, and basically that stopped them from overthrowing us. Now watch this. Let's jump down to 16 and where do I want to let's start at verse 6. But the Almighty Lord, Judah 16 and 6. It says, but the Almighty Lord have disappointed them by the hand for a woman. For the mighty one did not fall by the young men, neither did the sons of the Titans smite him, nor a high giant set upon him. But Judith, the daughter of Mariah, weakened him beauty of her countenance. So that's how you know the Lord delivered us, because it wasn't a mighty one that came against. Like that's normal. Like wars, men come together. That's why when you read back in chapter 14, why they were astonished and they were wondrously troubled that this maidservant beheaded the chief captain of Nebuchadnezzar. It wasn't a mighty one, it wasn't a warrior, it wasn't a giant that came through, but it was Judith. Watch this, verse 8. That's how you know it was of the Lord. Because the Lord sent strength in her hand to him. Verse 8. It says, For she put off the garments of her widowhood for the exploitation of those, I'm probably pronouncing, of those that were oppressed in Israel, and anointed her face with uh uh anointment, ointment, and bound her hair in a tire, took a linen garment to deceive him. Her sandals ravished his eyes. Her beauty took his mind prisoner, and the falchion passed through his neck. The Persians quaked at her boldness. Bees were daunted at her hardiness. That's how you know she was bad. She was bad to the bone. To the point to where he let his whole guard down to let her in there to basically, which was his demise. Um, Watch this. Verse 12, verse 11. Then my affliction shouted for joy. Now, this is Judith speaking. It says, Then my affliction shouted for joy, and my weak ones cried aloud. But they were astonished. These lift up their voice, but they were overthrown. The sons of the damsels have pierced them through and wounded them as refugees' children. They perished by the battle of the Lord. Let's jump down to uh verse. There was a point. Uh Verse 20. It says, So the people continued feasting in Jerusalem before the sanctuary for the space of 3 months, and Judah remained with them. So they basically praised God and feasted for 3 months, and Judah remained with them in Jerusalem. Verse 21. After this time, everyone returned to his own inheritance. Judith went to Bethulia, remained in her own possession, and was in her time honorable in all the country. Verse 22. And many desired her. None knew her all the days of her life. After that, Manasseh dead, gathered to. So basically, uh, once when Manasseh died, she didn't remarry for the rest of her life. And many men desired her, especially after what she did, after seeing her beauty and what she did. Many men desired her, but she knew no one. She didn't remarry for the rest of her life after her husband Manasseh. Verse 23. But she increased more and more in honor and waxed old in her husband's house, being 105 years old, and made her maid free. So she died in Bethulia, and they buried her in the cave of her husband, Manasseh. So basically, she lived to be 105 years old. So now let's go back to Ezra chapter 4. Right there. Ezra chapter 4, verse 7, verse 6 and 7. Reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, wrote they to him accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. So Judah took the history of Judah took place during the time of what we're reading here between 6 and verse 7, where you had Ahasuerus, Cambaeus, who was killed by Nezer. The fourth, that's what we read in Judith. And ultimately, Judith beheaded Holofernes, and basically that whole rebellion ceased. Uh, then verse 7, it says, and in the days of our Artaxerxes, which is Ardea, who was Cambaeus' second brother, took his seed, wrote Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabeel, and the rest of the companions of Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And the writing of the letter was written in the Assyrian's tongue and then interpreted in the Assyrian's tongue. So we pick up in part 3. We will pick up from here where we left off. This letter basically written to cease the building of the temple And basically they prevailed all the way up until the time of Darius Persian. So all praises be to the Most High God. I pray y'all got some understanding on that. Like I said, we will pick up part three next time I'm on here in Ezra's chapter 4. So quick recap of everything. Um, they Cyrus released us. The Northern Kingdom came to the Western Hemisphere. That's where they are. Northern Kingdom came to the Western Hemisphere. There still was a remnant that stayed. Judith was some of that remnant that was still in the land of the Northern Kingdom, um, as well as many others. That's why when you get to John 4, you still had Northern. Um, we Zerubbabel was a part of that first group of people that came because we did come in waves. Zerubbabel was a part of that first people that came back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, to lay the foundation. You had Nebuchadnezzar, who basically rebelled against Persia to come up uh, during the time of Ahasuerus or Cambyses II, which he was killed. Uh, and ultimately, Judith, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Judith to go and behead Holofernes, his chief captain, which basically ended that rebellion against Persia. Uh, Now, still have the heathens and other nations coming against Israel to hinder the building, and that's what we're reading. We'll pick up next time in chapter 4. So, all praise be to the Most High God. Shalom. Pray y'all got some understanding.